Okay, I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. This is the November 27th, 2017 meeting of the Greenwich Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. First order of business is seating of alternates. I see we have a full house tonight, so the alternates will not be seated, but please feel free to comment on the applications. I'm just not permitted to vote. Next is review and approval of the draft minutes of October 23rd, 2017. Has everyone received and had an opportunity to review the draft minutes? Okay, are there any comments or questions on the minutes? No? Would someone like to make a motion, please?
Well, I'll make a motion to approve, but Alan did point out that it is Norman Curlin, not Norman Curlin. So,
Okay.
I think I'd like to correct that slight error.
Okay. Very good.
Does Norman agree?
Very good. Is there a second on the amended draft minutes?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Next is review and approval of the 2018 public meeting schedule. Has everyone received a copy of the meeting schedule in their packets? Are there any comments or questions regarding the upcoming schedule for next year that anyone would like to bring up? No? Okay. Seeing no comments or objections, this can always be modified as we go forward, but I'll make a motion to approve the schedule for 2018. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Very good. Next up is the director's report. Patricia, please.
Okay, so we had finished out the budget. I'm going to not speak to that because we're going to deal with that in our next section of business. Of interest to the Office of First Selectman is conducting a process of evaluation for the land use departments. They have hired an outside consultant to evaluate the different aspects of obtaining the various permits and the process as a whole, and looking forward to what they find from an outside perspective, as well as I think it will also help us to have an outside person, entity, recognize that there are some things that just are based on statutes or based on the variabilities from both the applicant side and the agency sides, plus public. So it can't always, the permitting process can't always be wrapped up, but I'm looking forward to hearing any efficiencies that they might observe that we can do better. This fall, there's been a good number of workshops and conferences, and the staff has done a great job taking advantage of those. So that information is always good, comes back to the office, and I think makes our technical input to the agency that much stronger. And I'm glad to see that there's good offerings out there. That's it.
Great, thank you. Other business, review the fiscal year 19 budget.
I hope members were able to open up the attachments today. I'm sorry, our computers were down. So we had to sort of get to the last budget through backdoor means, and the budget is fairly standard from last year. We, through contractual obligations with salaries, we did have an increase in those two line items being part-time and regular salaries, and those obligations then had to be found elsewhere. We were able to trim from line items such as the consulting research and surveys. We took $800 from that account, and that $800 went over to monies to store. We have boxes and boxes from the files that we have to sit on for a year before the state allows us to destroy them after they've been digitized. So I imagine OSHA would not have been happy with some of our storage, and getting those out of the office. Picked up some, $500 under fees for reporting, legal ads, tuition expenses, so we just pulled small pieces from several accounts to make up, I think it was 0.38% of our budget. So I don't expect services to be impacted as a whole. We should be fine, although year in and year out, this is, it's going to eventually become an issue. But so far, we're holding tough.
Okay.
And likewise, our revenues are still projected to meet our carrying costs. And we've sort of narrowed the difference between what our carrying costs were and what the expected revenue. If you recall, we took out the fee for the green sheet, so we tightened that up a bit.
Okay, very good. So what is the timeline for the budget to be finalized?
So I'm looking for the agency to approve it this evening, or ask questions and hopefully approve it. It was actually due to the First Selectman's office a couple weeks back, but that's, our meeting schedule is such that that doesn't coincide very well. So they're waiting for the agency's approval on this. And the First Selectman will be presenting the town hall budget in January.
Okay. And it represents what percentage change year on year?
2% increase.
Okay.
And that is salaries. We had the contractual obligations through salaries was a 2.55 increase that we found through trimming elsewhere, brought it down to 2%.
Okay.
And that includes, if you recall, we've got two accounts. We have 173, which is the monies for just inland wetlands, and then we have 174, which is shared finances of planning and zoning, conservation, and wetlands, and that's an efficiency that covers 3 personnel, printing, and an assortment of other expenses that are just spread out between the 3 departments.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, any questions on the fiscal 2019 budget from the agency for the director? No?
I'd like to know what is the amount of the total budget and what are the main components of that total budget?
I don't have the exact figure here because I couldn't pull up the last one, but this is pretty darn close, within several $1,000s. Our budget is $636,700, and the biggest piece of that would be we've got salaries at call it $565,000.
Okay. Any other questions? Bill, did you have something?
No, just because one of the spreadsheets is so large, it'd be nice to see some of this printed out, but you just can't print it.
Right.
Hard to read.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 budget, reflecting a 2% increase versus fiscal year 2018 within guidelines set by the town.
I'll second.
All in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
So moved. Thank you. Okay, it is 7:15. We will move on to the public session. First up, public hearings. We have one item tonight. It is application 2017-150, 201 Clabbard Ridge Road, Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors, LLC, for Hawthorne Development 3, LLC, for demolition of the existing residence and construction of a single-family residence, septic, pool, patio drainage, grading, landscaping, and driveway modifications 0 feet from wetlands. Ms. Sesto, please.
Okay, list of documents. We have got a completed application with supporting documentation signed by Agent Brian Muller of Soundview Engineers, dated October 18, 2017. Plans entitled Construction Plans for Hawthorne Development 3 LLC, 201 Clabbard Ridge Road, prepared by Soundview Engineering and Land Surveyors, consisting of S1 cover sheet, EX1 zoning location survey, S3 site development plan, S4 low impact development, S5 Erosion Sedimentation Control Plan, S6 Construction Detailed, certified by Brian Muller, P.E., all dated October 16, 2017, with the site development plan having a last revised date of 11/22/17. 3, description of the proposed activity dated October 20th, 2017, prepared by Brian Muller, unsigned. 4, soils report, prepared by JMM Wetland Consulting Services and certified by James McManus, dated March 5th, 2012. 5, stormwater management report, prepared by Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors, certified by Brian Muller, P.E., dated October 16th, 2017. 6, stormwater management standards, drainage report exemption, prepared by Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors, certified by Brian Muller, P.E., dated October 16, 2017. 7, alternative 1, dated September 29, 2017, unknown preparer. 8, wetland assessment report, dated November 2, 2017, prepared by William Kenny Associates, signed by William Kenny and Timothy Veit. 9, map entitled Wetland Watercourse Conditions, Nursery and Proposed Residential, dated November 3rd, 2017, prepared by William Kennedy Associates. Map titled Wetland Buffer Enhancement Site Plan, dated November 3rd, 2017, last revised November 21, 2017, prepared by William Kennedy Associates, signed and sealed by William Kennedy. 11, staff report, dated November 13th, 2017, prepared by Lauren Lockwood and Patricia Sesto. Letter report, dated November 27, 2017, prepared by William Kenny and Associates, signed by William Kenny. Legal notice for this evening's public hearing, published on November 13th and 20th. Okay, so the agency may recall the last, I think it was in fact our last meeting, where this property was discussed. It's a property that housed the Kennedy, I think it was Kennedy Nursery, for about 70 years. And there's soil contamination, and that was the subject of the last application that was approved. This is then the follow-on project, which takes the project from a remediation site to a redevelopment property, having torn down the existing cottage, and this is a proposal then to rebuild. This property consists of there it is. This house, pool, wetlands here. Thank you. Large wetland here, and then the wetlands pushed to the rear. The existing driveway will remain. There's also 2 smaller wetland areas up front. The applicant is proposing this retaining wall, which is offset from the wetland by several feet. The retaining wall will have a 4-inch lip on it, such that any of the lawn area up here will drain to that wall and will infiltrate behind it rather than running over and into the wetland areas. There's a level spreader here to handle drainage associated with the house, and then a Cultec unit off to, what is that, the north side of the house? West, thank you. So, in your packets this evening, you have got my comments with then responses from the applicant. Running through those, the applicant has better described the association that they made in their initial report with regards to tying arsenic with the soil's ability to renovate other pollutants. That has been clarified to say that having the arsenic go away, which may or may not be a source of pollution, is a positive, and I think we all agree with that. Alternatives were requested. The applicant had proposed or had discussed 2 alternatives. One would be to revise the old nursery business, and the other was to leave the outbuildings. These 2 alternatives were dismissed as having likely a greater impact to the wetlands and watercourse, but there's really no discussion associated with that. Clearly, the nursery bringing that back to life certainly has the potential to continue degradation to the wetlands, although I did not see the obvious impact from leaving the existing outbuildings and how those would be more detrimental than the proposed lawn. The response did not really detail how this particular plan came together. I'm curious to have an understanding of the configuration of the lawn, what alternatives were associated with that, and I certainly do give credit to the fact that the property is being greatly improved through the remediation work, but that, I think, bears more discussion. The William Kennedy report did not discuss specifically what sorts of impacts are associated with residential development and how these are being mitigated or avoided. The response does speak to general short-term impacts and long-term impacts, the sorts of things I'm looking for. Lawns are known for non-point source pollution from dog waste, from pesticides, fertilizers, and how is it that this plan is addressing those things. With the modification of the stone wall, that is being addressed more specifically than when the staff report was first written, and I imagine Mr. Kenny will speak to that further. The residential teardown exemption, this goes back to the distinction that applicants need to make between the drainage manual, which is a terrific manual for the town to have, but its standards don't necessarily define the standards of this agency, and any redevelopment of a property should be coming in with the best that they can do for stormwater, whether there's a residential teardown exemption or not. To me, that just says we don't have to necessarily meet the standards of the manual, but here's the best that we could do given the circumstances. So I will let Mr. Kenny speak to that, again, going back to the Coltex and the modification of the retaining wall. The plan includes valuable effort to take out the old service roads for the nursery and required, I was looking for additional details with regards to how that would actually happen to be sure that, in fact, the compacted soils and the like were being properly removed. And the plan that Mr. Kenny will be addressing does have additional details associated with it. The Coltech unit was previously elevated to me, my interpretation of the plans, that it would be maybe half a foot below the high groundwater level. That has been modified. It's got too many buttons to choose from. This Coltech unit up here was the one that I had concerns, and it has been redesigned to lift it so that it is out of the high groundwater table. Then the quantities of the plantings, that has been revised. The wetland assessment did not address the extent of the lawn in order to provide a 60 to 100 foot deep rear yard, and then an area of 40 to 130 feet beyond. That's this area down here. Oh, somebody. I have a 50-50 shot on this one, and I kept getting it wrong. This lawn down here, I look forward to additional discussion as to the value of having this lawn, as well as there's lawn back here and up in here. Plus this is, how did this configuration come about? Comment 9 was properly addressed. Comment 10, so there is no conceptual septic system approval from the health department, and if it turns out that what's out there now in the end does not meet the standards of the health department and some changes occur, and this is a plan that the agency approved, the applicant is going forward at their own risk because they would need a separate permit. And yard drains, some are shown on the plan, and then there are others that we observed out on the property that are not shown. The intent, as stated by the applicant, is that the yard drains and irrigation will be abandoned and left in place in areas that are not proposed to be disturbed. And within areas of proposed disturbance, the drains and irrigation will be removed. I would like to discuss, again, having yard drains be left in place that are connected to, I'm assuming, the open water course or other places. I don't know where they discharge and whether leaving them in place is in fact an okay thing to be doing. Comment 12 was my effort to encourage the applicant to do more for the wetlands, and I do not take away from all the 7 items that they have articulated as being beneficial to the property. I still have some concerns, or I would like to see a more upland buffer adjacent to the wetlands rather than having that wall so close in all areas. It seems to me there could be some room for improvement and still maintain a balance of redevelopment of the property. So that is my run-through, and I look forward to the applicant's further discussion.
Okay, thank you, Pat.
Yeah, it's probably better, huh? Takes an engineer to move these things around. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the agency. For the record, Tom Hegney on behalf of the applicant. As the director has gone through, you saw this last month as part of a remediation which you approved and the demolition of the existing buildings. And as those of you who have walked the site have seen, this is a substantially impacted site. The long-time nursery business was covering virtually the whole place. There were roads through the wetlands. There was a significant site disturbance pretty much everywhere, and buildings that were either adjacent to or in the wetlands as part of the nursery operation. As part of what we're submitting to you this evening, and with the modifications based on our meetings with staff on November 17th, we are looking to substantially renovate and restore the wetlands that have been so severely impacted. Just as an example, the naturalized vegetative cover currently is 1.29 acres. With what we're proposing, it would be 3.04 acres. So a significant improvement on the natural vegetative buffer. Likewise, the impervious coverage is being reduced from 1.19 acres to 0.49 acres. The revised plans have increased the buffer. This was based on our meeting with staff on the 17th, between the demarcation wall and the wetland boundary. And also, as staff noted, modifying the detail so that the lawn acts as the infiltrator and not the wetlands itself. Mr. Kenny has developed a landscape plan to provide for all of the wetland areas to be restored, and also buffer areas to be restored as well. We've also revised the drainage system to address the other comments that were in the staff report dated November 13th. This is a very large site in the 2-acre zone. It's 5.3 acres. It would permit the construction of a 21,000 square foot house. We are not proposing a 21,000 square foot house. This house would be approximately 7,200 square feet, so substantially less than that could be constructed here. And an acknowledgement that this site does have extensive wetlands, and we've come in with a plan that honors that. The driveway stays where it is. The parking area is smaller than what's there now. But our client is also looking to have some utilization of the site, recognizing that we are doing a substantial amount of improvement to what is there now. I'd like to ask Mr. Kenny to go through those items that the director thought should be discussed more thoroughly for you. And then if there are any questions, our civil engineer, Brian Muller, is also here to answer any questions, but I didn't think there was anything specifically that he needed to address to you at this point. Bill?
Good evening. I'm Bill Kenny, Principal William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. I am a registered soil scientist and wetland scientist and a professional landscape architect. First, I just wanted to introduce this exhibit. I don't think it was formally submitted, but it is an aerial photo from Bing Maps, the online website, and what it shows is the nursery operation from a few years ago. And so this is very descriptive of the amount of activity occurring within the wetland. And we use this map as well as the town GIS map and the on-site survey that was completed by Soundview surveyors to prepare the exhibit. That was submitted to you, where we have a Yes, sure. Yes. So the property is a flagged rear lot. What you're not seeing here is the extension of the driveway that goes out to Clapboard Ridge Road. But what you're seeing is this is generally the boundary of the property. You have the existing residence, and then you have these these out structures. There's a shed in this area here. You could see the wetland line, when we get on another map, is going through the backside of these buildings. Here you have intensive nursery operations where they laid down heavy plastic on the ground and then had container plants growing on top of those, and so they're doing whatever you'd expect them to do with fertilizers and pesticides. And there's a couple of hoop houses here, and when we move to the next figure, you'll see that many of these improvements are right within the wetland itself. In fact, they also dug a ditch through this area here to help dry out this area. So between the barn and the ditch, it appears to be lawn or some other nursery operation that is heavily disturbed in the backside here. So that went right up to the ditch with the nursery operation. And through the wetlands in the front here, you have a number of ornamental plantings. You get to the back of the property, and it has these old gravel drives that were being used, as well as quite a bit of dumping in the northeast corner of the property here of landscape waste, soil, organic debris. If you look closely here in the photo, you could see where they are actually planting within the wetland nursery stock and digging it. These are the different dots here are holes where they had removed plant material from the nursery, so it's in and immediately adjacent to the wetland. Then finally, in this western area, they had quite a bit of a stockpile area where they would stockpile mulch, gravel, stone, and then parking equipment. In fact, you could see like a backhoe right here, and I think this photo, there's a few trucks in this photo as well, so they're right up against the wetland, and whether they're driving the trucks through the wetland as well as parking right in that area. So a lot of activity in and adjacent to the wetland on the property. So what we did was using that image in the town GIS and the actual field survey, we put together these two figures. On the left is the nursery operation, and this was included with the wetland assessment report that I submitted to you. It's on 11 by 17, the size that you should have. So on the left is the nursery operation, on the right is the proposed plan. And then we have a summary table, bottom center, and some of the things to look at there. We have what we call the mostly naturalized vegetative cover. So we looked at the aerial photo and found 3 areas that we believe were not as disturbed. There's an area in the southwest corner, area in the central part, and then the northwest. The central part is a wetland meadow. It's been cleared of trees, but otherwise it looked like it was substantially being avoided. I think it's the wettest part of the property, so they probably avoided it because of that. So you have these 3 areas. And under the nursery, that was about 1.3 acres. And then with the proposed plan, that's the dark green, we've increased that by 1.7 acres, so more than double the size of that naturalized area. So we're going to go into that area. There's a tremendous amount of invasive species on here, which is common with a nursery, a property that has had a nursery on it, because plants are being imported from other locations, maybe down south, and seed is in the containers that those plants are in. And so this site has all the things that you're used to seeing in an abundance. It has Japanese knotweed, which is very aggressive, the porcelain berry, and many other things. So we are proposing to naturalize these areas that were heavily impacted and used for the nursery, removing the gravel roads through here. We're maintaining 2 use areas for residential recreational use and connecting those with the elevated boardwalk rather than a gravel drive. And on the second sheet drawing that we submitted for the habitat enhancement work, we have a detail where we talk about removing the gravel and restoring the soil. It includes following the town's guidelines for amending the soil with compost and then replanting that area with a native wetland meadow mix. So that's in this area here. And then increasing the buffer widths. For example, when you look in this area where the barns were, which are shown in a red line work on the figure on the left, you could see that we've taken that line of heavy disturbance that had been right up against that channel and moved it back so it's completely outside the wetland. And now, on average, we've pushed that line about 10 feet south of the wetland. And that's where we're proposing to install the demarcation wall. That will also act as a low curb that would prevent runoff from the lawn from continuing as surface water into the buffer and then potentially into the wetland. So we're putting in the demarcation wall, adding some good filtration soil. So the wall will stop the surface water. The amended soil, the introduced soil, will provide a good infiltration medium that will provide treatment and hold back that first flush of water that you might see from the lawn surface.
Bill, is that like a sitting height wall, or how high is that?
It's like 18 inches, yeah. Yeah, 12 to 18 inches. So you see an increase of about 1.7 acres in the naturalized area, and you see a decrease in the, what I call the nursery landscape to by about an acre. Decrease in about an acre of the nursery landscape or lawn, depending on whether you're looking under the nursery activity or a residential activity. And then, so that 1 acre accounts for 1. part of that 1.7 increase in naturalized area. And the other decrease we're seeing to make up the difference of that 1.7 is a reduction in impervious area of about 0.7 acres. Impervious, under this definition, is as defined by the town DPW engineering, where they considered these compacted gravel surfaces as impervious. So it is, that does include those gravel. It's not macadam or asphalt, but it is areas that are extending through the wetlands that have been compacted, and we're going to remove those areas, restore the soils through adding a clean, fine sandy loam and amending the subsoils if needed, if they're compacted, with some compost. So we're going to be removing structures and debris from in and adjacent to the wetlands, removing the gravel drives, removing the contaminated soils, removing of the ornamental landscape from wetland areas, removal of the invasives, installing native trees, shrubs, and meadow vegetation, introducing stormwater runoff, water quality management measures, eliminating all the construction or the vehicular activity in and adjacent to the wetlands, and also taking a septic system that was, we're not sure what the quality of that system was, and putting in something that is up to current standards. I understand that the house with the FAR, the allowable FAR for this property is about 21,000 square feet, and so they're proposing a house, including the garages, that is at about 7,000 square feet. And that gets to, I think, a point that Pat was asking for additional information about how the plan came about. So the proposed residential plan, what's the basis for that design? Certainly the amount of wetlands on the property is a driving force, planning and zoning setbacks, where the existing disturbances on the site. So for those reasons, it's a relatively modestly sized house for this part of town. I think the house immediately to the west is 10,000 square feet. So the house that's off to the west is 10,000. We're proposing about 7,000, and that does include the garage, so it's slightly less than that even. And we've put the house where the existing house is. We've, between the septic system, setbacks from the septic system, and the wetland configuration, the shape of the lot, that's where we came up with the location for the house. The driveway is a modest driveway. It allows for some parking, but it doesn't have a grand courtyard, rival court, and things of that sort. The pool is of a common size, and we've pushed it up against the house. And lastly, the idea for the lawn was, so we've reduced the amount of nursery or ornamental landscape by about an acre, but we still have a lawn area that, and the property owners would like to have this size lawn, even though we're reducing lawn or ornamental landscape by an acre. We still have what's being shown, and because of the reduction in lawn area, because of the reduction in impervious, because we're introducing filtration soils and demarcation walls and curbs, and doing the invasive species management and removing the gravel drives, it's our conclusion that we're having a beneficial impact to the wetland due to those things. Right. Yes. We do not have an alternative that shows a wider buffer.
We should clarify that. We did increase the buffer and create less lawn area after we met with staff on the 17th. So what this plan shows is a revised demarcation feature that provides more of a buffer between the wetlands and the lawn area. It was pretty much right along the wetlands themselves. And as Bill said earlier, we're providing an average of 10 feet between the demarcation wall and the wetland boundary line. And it's intended to be a true, not just a demarcation line so that people know where the wetland, the extent of the lawn should be, but also to provide for infiltration in the lawn, not within the wetland buffer or in the wetlands themselves. And Bill, maybe you want to just go through and describe that detail for the agency?
Well, and I guess also, Bill, if you could also, when you talk about this, explain I see that we've got the retaining wall, the sitting wall to help protect that area, but you do have those other two lawned areas that just have a boulder that looks like it's up every 40 feet or so. You can talk about how those areas would any runoff from those areas would be mitigated to the rest of the wetlands.
So the demarcation wall curb is in this area right through here. So it's along the majority of the border. In other areas, we could certainly extend it. In this area, we're fairly close to the wetland, but then we get substantial distance away in this area here. The wetland line diverges from the lawn boundary in that location. So I would say we're start to get 20 and then up to 50 or 60 feet away from the wetland in this area where the wall doesn't exist. So wherever the wall exists, we are on average 10 feet or more away. In many areas, we are more than 10 feet. And then in the back, I would say we're 25 feet or more on average away from the wetland. So in those areas, again, we've moved the lawn or ornamental landscape. We've pushed it back out of the wetland by 25 or 30 feet in this area and in many areas. And then
Bill, out of the 5.3 acres,
one acre.
1 acre.
And how much is wetlands
1.74 acres.
total?
Yes.
Existing?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so we took the ornamental landscape from 2.8 acres down to, it's 1.8 acres, excuse me. We reduced it from 2.8 to 1.8, a difference of 1 acre. Excuse me. Lawn and ornamental plantings. So it includes foundation plantings and other.
So the lawn area is not just contiguous to the house, but also includes the proposed bocce court area and this treehouse area, that there's supposedly lawn around there or not?
That's true.
So that's got to be more than 1.8, isn't it? If you include all those areas?
That's
They're all going to be mowed. Right?
yes. So the dark green here is the
Well, that's wetland.
3 acres,
Meadow.
and then we have impervious. Yeah. So the 1.8 is this area, and the lawn in this area here.
This area, this watercourse. Daylight's right off the property here.
Okay.
So how does this lawn here, how are you protecting that off-site watercourse?
That is something that we could look at more closely, certainly. We could pitch that back in so that to ensure that nothing is draining off-site at that location.
What's the value of that section of lawn? So I suppose that somewhat escapes me. That escapes me.
Right.
Put there.
It's the recreation value for the property owner for having throwing a lacrosse ball around or football or.
That you couldn't do behind the house here? I mean, looks like a pretty good area to toss stuff around.
Well, it's 200 feet from the corner of the driveway to the lower part of the yard there. How about a lacrosse match?
It's to provide for a recreational area for the children of the owner, so that they'll be able to have active activities outside.
But I suppose I don't understand, what can you do here that you can't do here? So you've got an open water course right here.
Well, as Bill said, just as we have handled the runoff from the northerly part of the lawn to the wetland area, we could also pitch that and provide a demarcation along the easterly, or in this case, the lower portion of the property.
The septic system, the berm associated with the system is 168. So that makes the whole septic area higher, pitching out and away. I don't think we can change that.
Can't change that. But if we're having the septic system there,
So at that point,
go ahead.
The end of the septic system is by code, I believe, Brian, 60 feet from the watercourse?
It is.
Yes.
It's
So once-
60 feet, does it measure off from the off-site watercourse too?
Brian Muller, PE, Soundview Engineers. Yeah, it measures 60 feet exactly. Measures 60 feet exactly off of a radius off of the end of that pipe.
Oh, good, okay.
It's a little more than 60 off the end of that pipe, just for, how water will spill out a little bit. And like Bill said, we can grade this area here, the septic, not so much. We can maybe install a curb here, but I'd rather see it just flow naturally over the lawn in this area, instead of concentrating it, making a shallow concentrated flow. Then it'll start picking up other sediments and other potential contaminants from the lawn. So, I mean, in my opinion, this whole channelized thing was all man-made.
Don't disagree.
Yeah, so,
It's to the detriment of the wetland that it's there.
and this whole existing area here, which we're making lawn, I mean, is a big improvement. It used to be all compacted gravel. I mean, if you have an excavator 400 driving over that area, you could compact the soil up to 4 feet down. We're also proposing to till all the gravel areas 18 inches down with the tiller, and we'll compost amend it as we do that too. So that'll break up and remove all the gravel, break up the compacted soil, and increase the infiltration rates in all the areas we're proposing to remove the gravel, which will minimize the surface runoff throughout the whole lawn area. And also too, I'd like to add to this stone wall here, we're gonna do a dry laid stone wall. So it will have critters and it will create a kind of a natural habitat. And by making it dry laid, obviously it'll be porous, but behind the wall, we're gonna use like a silty clay material to block the water. And so we have this curb where the soil will slowly pitch up to the top of the wall here so that the water does force it to go down and through the sandy loam that we're proposing to put back here. which will then filter into the groundwater, which will then end up in the brook.
And which way does the groundwater flow? Do you know?
Right now, it's all flowing towards the brook here. This whole thing, there's a high point here in the driveway at about 172, so it's like right here in the middle here.
Yeah.
This portion grades down towards the two front little pieces here, and then the rest all kind of, this high area here is the only place for a septic on site. So that's why the septic's here, which also drove kind of the position of the house. So everything flows this way here. Also, too, we rose the house up as much as we could.
Okay, that's a surface flow. What
Yeah.
about the groundwater?
Yeah, the groundwater is going to follow the same pattern.
Assuming that the rock underlying follows the same pattern as the surface.
The-
Did you know which way the groundwater does? Did you-
Yeah, it's
did you do
flowing-
any- Did you do any
Test
work
pits?
on the groundwater? Test pits?
Yeah, we dug test pits, yeah. Yeah, so it's definitely flowing towards this brook here. We rose the house as much as we could, according to the other regulations we have to follow as well. Mainly grade plane. We were limited to only a 4-foot wall here, so we raised the house as much as possible, so we weren't pumping that much groundwater out of the ground, so we can leave it. And then any pumping that we're doing, instead of doing a point discharge to the brook or any wetland area, we're pumping it to a Coltech system, which will hopefully infiltrate back into the groundwater far enough away from the house that it'll just flow naturally underground and end up in the surface stream here.
Okay, so when you did your test pits on the groundwater, did you analyze the groundwater?
No, we didn't personally take samples of the groundwater. The environmental company did.
And did you get the results from the environmental company?
Yeah, I can't really speak on them because I'm not a
I'm
environmental.
just curious as to whether there's arsenic in the groundwater.
I believe that they said there was no arsenic in the groundwater. It was just in the top, 12 inches,
So
foot,
the-
foot of soil.
So the arsenic is not migrating into the groundwater?
From what I understand, no.
Okay.
Obviously, further testing when they remediate, if there is, they'll remediate appropriately.
Okay, the problem I'm having fundamentally is a philosophical problem. It's clear that you're doing a huge amount of work mitigating the damage that has been done by folks prior to you. And I think you deserve kudos for that. That's great. If you were trying to develop this property from a native standpoint, we would never, ever let you put the wall that close to the wetland. And I think you recognize that, Mr. Hagney.
I do, Mr. Benton, but we're not dealing with a pristine native site
I
here.
understand that.
And I appreciate your other comments, because we've worked very hard to come up with something that we think is not just an improvement, but a vast improvement to what's there, and also taking into account that we want to have long-term protection for the wetlands as well.
Okay, nevertheless, I sort of think about this sort of like the fuel gauge on my car, right? On one side, we've got pristine, on the other side, we've got completely damaged. This side is coming from completely damaged, and the question is, how far should that needle go? How far do we need to see that needle go? And the way I'm feeling is that the buffer has to be bigger. Yeah, you've done a huge amount of work, but we need to get further away from the wetland nevertheless. That's the first thing. The second thing is, at the northern end of the property, down in that panhandle there, the wall is almost...
In this area
No,
here?
no, there, that
Here.
wall, that section of wall is almost flush with the ground based on the heights. I can't see it staying there. I mean, Johnny's going to go out for a long pass, hit the wall, and wind up in the wetland, face first. And I don't think the owner is going to really appreciate that. So the wall's either going to disappear or it's going to be raised. Because I believe right now it's about, the top of the wall is 166, the ground on one side, and the wetland side is 166.1, and the ground on the non-wetlands, on the residential side, is 165.9. So the thing is 1 inch fundamentally. And I don't see how that's any sort of a barrier. I can see it as a tripping hazard, but I don't see it as a barrier.
Well, certainly we can raise that up so that
I don't know,
it's-
Brian, what, Mr., I
higher.
should say Mr. Mueller. I'm sorry.
You're talking about right
No, I'm talking about
Right
right
where
there.
your finger is.
here?
Just about right where.
I mean, we can raise that to have a little bit higher of a lip, but I mean, whether it's
I
6
just-
inches or not, 6 inches, an inch, either way, it's kind of a tripping hazard. If you're going up for, if in talking about your analogy, going up for a pass, you're not really looking. So even if the wall was all the way up, you'd probably still run
What's
into
the
it.
purpose of a 2-inch wall?
Well, it's not really a 2-inch wall, but according to the map, when we taper a wall back into grade, we kind of show it where it ends up back into grade. So that's,
That's a design element as opposed to protecting the wetland. I mean, a 2-inch wall,
well, I mean, it'll be a boulder.
a heavy rain, it's gonna.
Well, it won't be like a small piece of stone. It'll be a boulder, more than likely. And it may be, this is just design. It may end up being, a foot high and then maybe having 8 inches on the other
Mr.
side.
Mr. Kenny just stated that it was a sitting height 19-inch wall.
Yeah, what is it?
Dry laid wall.
Dry
I mean,
laid.
what is
Dry
it?
laid? What is it?
Yeah, it's going to be dry laid. Yeah.
1 inch
What is
high?
it? Is it gonna be boulders?
Yeah, it's going to be boulders, stacked stone.
1 foot high, buried.
Well, it may be in.
Buried 11 inches into the ground.
Yeah, so when you build a wall, though, eventually it just tapers back into grade, right? So it doesn't just end. I mean, we can just end it.
It could.
At the
just
property
add-
line.
So if you want it to just end, we can do that. And
I'm really, really confused now as to what it is. The plan says that it's gonna be 1 inch above grade and it's gonna be a foot high. So is it gonna be buried 11 inches? What is it?
let me look at this map here. Yeah, just put this up front here.
What is it here? What is it here? What is it here?
No, I understand.
Yeah, is it-
You're talking right here?
Yeah, right in there. And you've got the same sort of issue throughout.
Yeah, so we're proposing, the reason why the bottom, it's actually a foot high here. So we're proposing, this is all gravel and fill in this area, so we're proposing to remove it. And by removing it, we're gonna lower the grade on the bottom part of the wall because it's fill that's located there right now.
So,
Backside.
so there's excavation here that you're not showing.
Well, how would
It says it's
you,
165.9,
where does it say 165.9?
just to the left of the wall, a little X.
Yeah, but you got a box.
That's existing.
Yeah, right. Top of wall is
Yeah.
166, but the ground is 165.9.
Give another one. 64. Give another box. Just go.
Yeah, right here, he's talking about 165.9 right here.
That's the
Yeah,
1
that's
foot.
existing grade. We're just showing proposed grade on top of 166, which is just showing this whole area as being flat.
I'm sorry, I'm
If you go just,
not enough of an architect to be able to read things that aren't there on the plan.
if you go just 30 feet to the west, then the top of wall is 166 and the bottom of wall is 164.5. That's the 18 inches.
Right.
And what you have is, you have a,
Mr. Kenny, what's confusing me is that you're showing the ground there to be 165, and you're showing the ground just to the east of that, it's 165.9,
No, that's an existing spot.
then you're excavating.
No, we're technically filling it in.
this is a profile concept of what's happening. So for the majority of the wall, the majority of the length, you have this 18 inches. As you get to the property line here, the grade starts to rise up. So we're meeting that grade, and we're going to be 4 inches, plus we're going to go 4 inches above that. So that's why you have that condition there. When you meet that, as the grade starts to rise up and your wall dies into that grade, at one point, the grade and the top of the wall become the same.
Okay. Going back to Mr. Benton's first point about proximity to the wetland, I mean, whether the wall is on average 18 inches or 14 inches or 22 inches, the location of the wall, proximity to the wetland is really the question. what do we say, 10 feet from the wetland?
On average.
On average.
But that includes some areas that
Very close.
are very close and some areas that. And,
Pull it back.
Madam Director, what is the basic buffer area that we expect in this neighborhood?
Well, it's certainly wetland by wetland, but if we're looking for, like, sort of a generic number, we're looking for 15 to 20 feet on average.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the actual number that we're looking.
Generically speaking, 15 to 20 feet on average.
Yeah, and
Your 10
yeah.
feet
And
includes
that's, you know,
some
that's
areas where you're way far away from it, in the corner up there. So to say it's 10 feet on average is, I would not call it misleading so much, because that's too pejorative, given the amount of work you've done here. But a large part of it is very, very close to the wetland.
And after we met with staff a little over a week ago, we did modify it to provide more of a buffer, particularly along the area which is behind the house. We are looking to maintain some type of recreation area for the property, recognizing there are significant wetlands here, but also recognizing that you have to have some degree of usability of your property. To have a philosophical discussion on it, at what stage is it impacting the usability of the property that it becomes undesirable?
But I don't think.
And we're looking to provide a balance.
Philosophical, though, when, I still haven't heard whether or not there was concretely an alternative put forth. We keep talking about a discussion with staff, that's the academics, since we're here now looking at the application. I'm not sure what the exact discussions were, but the burden is on you, as you know, to put forth a plan that would show an alternative that would have less impact. I happen to agree that the buffer is virtually non-existent in some places here, and I'm having difficulty with that concept as well. So, and I think that an alternative should have been presented that would show less impact. I think that's your burden. I think that's something that you ought to have done since this is a public hearing, and I don't see it.
And that's what we did do with the revised detail and the revised location of the demarcation feature, to provide for infiltration that would not impact the wetland and would provide what we believe is a sufficient buffer.
Well, I'm afraid I at least don't. And-
I hear that.
And I have tremendous confidence and respect for our staff, but they don't speak for us. So the fact that you may have agreed something with the staff does not obligate us in any way, shape, or form.
No, well, certainly.
And I know you're aware.
Staff has already made comments about the concerns they have as well, so let's not,
Yeah,
let's not sort of articulate this as an agreed.
Oh, no, I didn't by any means intend to imply that. What I wanted to say was that staff said, we want you to do something here, and we have done something. And it is our opinion, and that of our professionals, that is sufficient to protect the wetlands.
But I don't want to keep belaboring this point, but I think it's important because we keep mentioning it. You don't have an alternative plan that shows us a greater buffer. What you're saying is you had a plan that you discussed with staff which had less of a buffer, and you improved it slightly. But you've never had a real alternative plan with a greater enhanced buffer.
Well, it's our professionals' opinion that there is no impact on the wetlands. And if there is no impact on the wetlands, under state law, you're not required to provide an alternative.
But there is a value to the buffer to maintain and protect the wetlands. And if your argument were carried to its logical extreme, because the buffer is not in the wetlands, you should be able to eat up the buffer as much as you want. That would not have a direct impact on the wetlands. Now, you know that the buffer has been supported on many separate instances, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you case law. And the buffer is an important element in the protection of the wetlands. So to just say that your professionals deem it sufficient obviates the need for having our agency at all.
No, that's not the case at all. And what we're looking at is the totality of it and how this plan has evolved and is not only restoring over an acre of wetlands and buffer, but also in the long term providing a protection for the health and longevity of the wetlands. Well, you know, we're looking at it not just short term, but also long term.
So, just, so yes, this plan provides more buffer than the first one, and that's all that's being said here. I did not endorse this plan or anything along those lines. And I think my comments have probably made that pretty clear. The regulations say avoid, minimize, mitigate. So I agree that the changes are beneficial as mitigation, but just haven't passed the first hurdle of avoid. And avoiding, in part, means creating less of the source of pollution to an extent that's reasonable. I concur that an amount of lawn is appropriate out here. I don't know that nearly 2 acres of lawn is necessary. And then, as I pointed out, there's some areas I just don't understand why it needs to be lawn. The pieces up here, I can buy into those because there is a 5-acre piece of property. Having somebody actually go out there and it's higher up, I think there's vistas of the wetland that are going to help that wetland in the long run, actually. I don't get this over here, and I continue to be concerned with this open water course that's just off the property. I don't wholly get this big bulb out here, but I could live with it. So this fails me. The logic of this amount of lawn totally fails me. And even here, it could be less, but it's not horrible. I'm just struggling where did this actually come from? And I suppose that's what's, to me, that's lacking is the logic that put this line on a map.
Well, it's part of our discussions with our client on the usability of the site and what.
But what are the uses that give this dimension its form?
It's for recreational activity.
So how come 50 feet is needed, not 45 feet, or that lower area that's 160 feet long? What is it that, other than more, what's driving, and maybe more is the answer? That could be it. But I'm not hearing, sort of the discussion that says these are the parameters that we're working with. My kid loves baseball, or, we're big bocce fans, and, this is the size, the dimensions we're looking for.
Perhaps we need to have more of a clarification on that from our client, so that we can bring a more compelling argument to you on that particular issue, and see if there is some accommodation we could make for the points that are being made here.
Right, if you take a close look at the plan, you'll see that there are many places where you're 5 feet, certainly well less than 10, and as little as 5 feet away from the wetland.
Mm-hmm.
That's really too close. Even though you might be 10 on average, 5, I believe, is way
r-
too close.
Rather than, we understand that point, and rather than continue the discussion, perhaps rather than calling for a vote or closing the item, that we could request a delay so that we can review these items and be prepared to address them for you at the next hearing.
Okay,
I think
what's
that
our
would be-
time?
We have December 18th is our next meeting.
No, I understand that, but relative to this public hearing, we
Oh,
have.
because it just opened tonight, we're fine to go to the next
Yeah.
meeting.
There's
okay.
plenty,
So
there's,
we don't even
from
have
a
to continue
statutory
it. Yeah, we don't
standpoint,
even have to
there's plenty of
continue
time.
Yep.
Right, fine. And I just want to repeat, I'm gratified by what you're doing
Right.
in terms of remediation, in terms of improving the property.
But we will
I just want more.
make sure that we understand both those points, Mr. Bender.
Nor am I adverse to having some lawn. I'm clear about that as well.
I
It's
guess-
too much.
I guess I would just add, though, that were I on your side of the podium, I'm not quite sure that, this is not clear to me what a possible resolution might be here. In other words, if we were to say, take the existing proposed wall and move it 10 feet inward, would that be satisfactory?
That's a fair question to ask, and one of the difficulties in coming back with another plan is I'm sort of negotiating against myself, because I don't really know what that boundary is or what the approvable limit would be, and so I take a step forward, hoping that that step will be sufficient, but not really knowing whether it is or
But
isn't.
that's because you're not recognizing that the lack of a buffer has no impact on the wetland. So I still think that's your burden, personally. So to put it on us to give you a clear line is I think, a wrong burden shift here. You're completely ignoring the fact that in some places, there's no buffer at all. And as Mr. Benton said, which he articulated better than I could, if this was being reviewed as in a vacuum, that would be an unacceptable situation.
Yeah, it's just that we're not in a vacuum when we have a substantially impacted site that we're looking to improve to a great extent. But I take Mr. Galvin's point as well.
Thank you. Well, I think Madam Director indicated a sort of a general rule of thumb that the agency is looking at for sites of this nature. I want to ask if there's anyone else on the agency that has a question on this. This is a public hearing. Is there any public questions or comments or statements regarding this application?
I just have,
Bill?
I think it was Brian who got into a bit of detail about the type of soil that would be put on the inside of the wall. And there's a couple of issues here. This wall is seen as both a demarcation, but also, the way you described it, it is a physical barrier, and because of the nature, not just because it's mechanically of a structure, but because of the use of soils down a certain depth, which you did not specify, that was to be a barrier below grade that would keep the water percolating down as opposed to sheet flowing, into the wetland. I mean, the wall has two different characteristics, the way you presented it. One is just the physical barrier, stay out of the wetland, and whether it's 8 feet away, 18 feet away, or 26 feet away is a different issue. But you're also adding a technical dimension.
Yes.
Is the nature of the construction of the soil behind the wall, in your technical opinion, equivalent to an additional 5 or 8 feet of linear buffer?
I don't know how I can answer that,
Well,
but,
therefore, why do the
well, because we want to do a dry laid wall. If we were going to do a masonry wall, that would keep the flow of surface water from hitting the curb and going down Instead, if it was just dry laid with no masonry wall, it would just go right through it and maybe go down a little bit and then go through, or through the cracks of the rocks. But so that this way, if we and the specified soil is a silty clay along the backside of the wall, wouldn't stretch into grade, existing grade at all. It would just be where we're filling. Unless we remove some soil there, some fill or something, then it would stretch down, but I wouldn't want it to go too deep. It's mainly just to keep the water from flowing into the lawn and then through the lawn, and keep it from going through the wall. I want it to go back into natural grade before it goes into. It could be, yeah. It could be, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, from that standpoint, yes, I see it that way too. I'm just not, Mr. Kenny maybe can speak on that a little bit. I'm not a wetland soil scientist, but, yeah, it's not just a physical barrier. Yeah, there is a technical and engineered side to the wall. Even though it doesn't need to be physically engineered, the soil on the other side would be a specific gradation in soil type.
So we would ask for you to continue this to your next hearing in December.
No, just keep it open. Just keep it public hearing. Okay, we will continue to next
Thank you.
month. Thank you.
This is marked up.
He has this.
Okay, we are moving on to pending applications. The first one, I believe, is requested a continuation, but I'll read it out anyways. 2017-116, 30 Vineyard Lane, SE Minor and Company, Inc., for Regina Kuroyarova for construction of a retaining wall 7 feet from wetlands.
Yes,
Okay, so that.
they'd request to continue that.
Okay, so we will continue that. Next pending applications is 2017-135, 45 Bering Hill Road. Anneman Kirby for Matthew Mitchell for construction of a single-family residence, demolition of 2 existing ancillary structures, drainage, grading, and landscaping 35 feet from wetlands. Ms. Sesto, please.
Okay, we should note who was at this site. I'm going to go with Ms. Curlin was there. I think Mr. Jay, were you at this site? No. Ms. Chilindroff? Yeah, how about we run down the line? I think Mr. Rossi was there as well.
Yeah, I was at the site.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Rossi?
Yes, yes.
Ms. Curlin? And Mr. Rogers? Okay, thank you. This property is one that has an existing antique house and barn, and the applicant is looking to redevelop it by adding a more substantial residence than the antique structure, and also to retain the barn. The property was historically used for horses, and when you're out on site, the paddocks are still evident, and the changes in the grade associated with that. So, yeah, that's, and I should say that, and I keep losing my pointer. I got pointer problems today. Oh, now this, oh, there it is. Topping Pond is this portion out of this site, so the good portion of the property is in fact wet, very wet. There's also a wetland in this portion of the property where the pond outlets, and then there's a stream and the wetland is associated with that. This is the proposed new dwelling. Over here is the existing antique, and then there's a barn through here. The applicant has proposed Coltech units in the old pasture area. The septic is up here along the western property boundary. There's also extensive regrading of the paddock, which when you're out at the site, it doesn't show up very well through the mapping, but each of the paddocks has a depressed area, so that there's almost like a berm that runs between the different paddocks, and once the fencing is taken down, it will be very peculiar. So that explains the extensive grading to the rear of the property. Let's see. I have a supplemental staff report that was dated November 20th, and I'm just going to run through what the main points were and how they have been addressed by the applicant. A narrative was subsequently submitted, although there's no indication of who prepared it. No letterhead, no signature, no nothing. 710E of the regulations requires the applicant submit alternatives. No sketches were submitted per regulation, but there was an unsigned narrative from Brooks and Falotico that provides insight to the design and the different parameters that they had to consider in laying out this particular design. A biological narrative has since been submitted, and the report offers valuable assessments of the on-site portion of the wetland, but does not partner this assessment with an evaluation of the larger system on site. Mr. McManus states very clearly in his report that it is his responsibility to assess the on-site portion of the wetland. Wetland systems are not defined by property boundaries. They are biological systems. I can understand sort of focusing on the portions of a wetland that are closest to the development and the impacts that that might have closer, and then extrapolating that out for the larger system. But I do respectfully disagree with confining the evaluation to just on-site portions. The infiltration unit has been moved, and that is of benefit, taking it out of the wood line, preserving that wooded buffer to the wetland. There's no test hole data for the proposed infiltrators, and given the past use of the areas as paddocks, I'm interested in hearing about the soil compaction and how those past uses render this area still suitable for infiltration. The silt fence was revised appropriately, and let's see, the rear yard encompasses 1 acre of land. I do believe that the silt fence, that there should be a separation once the septic leaching area goes in, that this, and the grading is done here, that this area should be cut into sections with additional line of silt fence, so you don't have an area where that is impacting too heavily or relying too heavily on just one row of silt fence much further out. It is too large an area. The leaching fields were relocated from the original plan. No grading. The grading is now shown with the relocated leaching fields. The reserve area is 60 feet upslope of the wetland boundary within existing lawned areas. Similar to our previous discussion, this property being redeveloped does have the opportunity to remove lawn from, or undo some decisions of the past where we have lawn right up to the wetland boundary, in particular over here. This area, not so much, but still an impacted buffer. In redeveloping a property, we need to look at all the elements of redevelopment, not just the residential portion. To that end, a buffer has been, included in the revised area here, which is presently lawn up to the wetland buffer. On the plan, the specifics of the planted buffer are provided in the supplemental report by JMM Wetland Consulting. The plan does not reflect the same locations as shown on the site plan, so those two pieces need to be rectified. And the plan should provide a limit of lawn demarcation and the size of the shade trees increased to 2 to 2.5 inch caliber. And a planting plan for the rain garden should be submitted. So I would say overall there's been significant improvements from the first plans that were submitted, and we have just some smaller details to work out, and provided these can be addressed and any other issues the agency may raise, I think overall a recommendation for approval is in order.
Okay, thank you, Madam Director. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Tom Oneman. and I will apologize in advance for any duplicate information I'll be presenting. With me this evening are Chuck Willett, the project architect from Brooks and Filatico, and Jim McManus, our environmental scientist. We present to you this evening an 8-acre property. Approximately 3 acres are Topping Pond, and that's at the rear of the property, the north end of the property. Formerly, the subject property was a horse farm with the structures built close to the road and the paddocks and fields placed behind the structures, extending to the north and to the west. The farm was built circa 1930, with this particular property being created and subdivided off in 1978. To the east, there is an extensive wetland area surrounding a brook. The brook is a discharge stream from Toppings Pond, which flows to the south. The proposed redevelopment is to retain several of the existing buildings and construct a new dwelling with accessories. The new dwelling is a modest 5-bedroom house. It is placed forward on the property also, just 85.5 feet from the front property line. The front property setback is 85. We have an insufficient right-of-way in Burying Hill Road, and that increases our front yard setback. A courtyard is framed by the new dwelling and the existing barn. The proposed driveway is small and is placed over an existing driveway and parking area that was formerly used during barn operations. The project contains the usual septic systems and drainage. Water supply is by well, and septic is going to be on-site sewage disposal. The project also contains superior low-impact development features. Water quality. We are required to process 1,697 cubic feet of water. We are processing in this system 2,617 cubic feet of water. That's a 54% increase over what's required in the stormwater management regulations. Retention storage volume. We're required to store 840 cubic feet. The systems presented to you this evening store 1,126 cubic feet, an increase of 34%. Total suspended solids, TSS. The requirement is to remove 80%. The features before you this evening, we have as much as 93% in the plan. Total suspended solids removed. The use of control structures and deep sump catch basins have been utilized, increase in improvements in infrastructure on the site. There are no new curb cuts, easy for you to say. There are no new curb cuts being utilized on the property. We're using all existing. The septic footprint is made smaller using the green leach system, so that prevents more disturbance and less fill. And we have a planted buffer of 5,851 square feet. So with that, we feel we've done a bit of work, good work, we feel, for the redevelopment of the property. And our team would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. And we've read the staff report, and we have gone through the conditions presented in the staff report, and we find no objections to any of those. But we'd be happy to discuss that now.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anneman? Guess I just.
Can you speak to the compaction of the paddocks, that soil, and their suitability
Yeah.
for infiltration?
Yeah, well, obviously they have been compacted, and the suitability of the soils are such that we have had to add notes about rototilling and pre-processing of the subsoils. Because what we have out there is we have fairly thick topsoil layer, about 8 inches. And then we have a loam layer, which varies quite differently along the site. And then we get into a hard pan, which sort of elevates the groundwater and creates the seep that you see in the middle of the site. So what we found are actually very good thicker loam layers on the right-hand side of our proposed development and the left-hand side of our proposed development. But, if I may, running through the center here to the seeps up at flags 11, 10 and 11, there's actually an elevated hard pan, which pushes the groundwater up. So there is a bit of pre-processing that we're going to be doing with our recharge system out here in the paddock area because of the former consolidation.
And the engineer of record will be observing that, and as part of it, the engineer's sign-off?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Pat, are we calling for any sort of demarcation feature around the wetland?
So I do call for demarcation feature associated with the revised, or the planting plan. So, again, the two plans have to be made to be consistent with each other. I had not necessarily called for a demarcation at the wood line.
Okay.
Yeah, the buffer is, in the lawn area.
Yeah.
And extends to the current wood line. Yeah, we don't have a demarcation placed on the plan.
I would say that, so here, there's a little finger of the wetland, but the bulk of the wetland is down.
Right.
Similar to most of our woodlands around, we don't have a good forest floor layer of vegetation. So having some herbaceous buffer through here, not necessarily as wide as this one, because this was right up at the wetland, that would help any sediment and pollutants that are being generated from the lawn before it hits the woodland. That would be advantageous.
Yeah, and actually, the wood line is a good demarcation feature.
Right.
Because all the wetlands are in the wooded area.
Yeah, so I'm suggesting in addition to the wood line, so like a meadow buffer off of the wood line to help.
Well, that's what we've proposed here. We have 5,800.
Yeah, I think that's over here.
Yes.
So I'm actually
It wraps around to the north.
over here too.
So, yeah, I'll introduce Jim McManus. I'm sure Jim is more knowledgeable on those things.
Okay.
Good evening. For the record, James McManus, Certified Professional Soil Scientist, JMM Wetland Consulting Services, offices in Newtown. So, Pat, I did propose, and we're going to marry those plans.
Good, yeah.
But it was a large shrub, medium shrub, and tree planting plan. And so you wanted to extend,
Yeah, I think the planting plan that you've got
right,
here is just fine.
Yep.
I'm suggesting that we add 15 feet of meadow grasses
Like a
to
meadow
separate
mix.
the manicured lawn.
conservation, wildlife mix, something like wildlife?
Yeah, because I'm
Right.
concerned about that much lawn draining into the wooded portion of the upland buffer, and there's without any herbaceous growth on the forest floor.
Right.
I think it just come up short.
Come up with a seed mix that you might take a look at.
Yeah.
15 foot, you said, something like 15, 20 feet, something like that?
Yep, that would be great.
Okay. That was my question. Any agency questions on this application or comments? No? Public questions or comments on this? No? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Motion approved with the conditions as stated, and with the addition of the meadow mix. A second.
So I would modify special condition number 2 to be more specific. The revised mitigation plan would marry up the inconsistencies and include a 15-foot meadow buffer off the western side of the wetland.
Okay.
Western side of the wetland, correct. Eastern side of the lawn.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, you're messing with me.
I'll have to say on the eastern side.
So I'll make a motion with that modified language from the director.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay. On to new applications for review. First up is 2017-146, 34 Copper Beach Road, Northeast Pond Restoration Services for Mark and Beth Newman for dredging a pond. Mr. Clausy, please.
Okay, the applicant proposes to dredge about 100 cubic yards of sediment from the small pond at the front of their property. This pond is silted in pretty badly since it was last dredged 30 years ago. The method to be used is a hydraulic suction dredge, and the sediment is going to be dried out on-site and then spread by hand through the lawn area to the north and east of the house. Let's see. Their analytical testing of these sediment in the pond has been done, and there are no contaminants that would preclude this use of this material on a residential property. The original application came in without any sort of a buffer planting proposal. I guess Mr. Wendell's did make a note in his narrative that were going to be some blue flag and ferns planted around the pond. During the review, the comment was made that an average 15-foot wide buffer around about 75% of the pond perimeter would be an enhancement to the on-site and downstream water quality. The conditions of approval in here were based on the idea that an acceptable response to this guidance was received by tonight's meeting. I'm going to pass down 2 emails with attached plans that Mr. Wendell sent. The first, the paperclip is a set, so just take one clip set. First email on November 22nd with the associated plan, and the second one was sent today with a slightly different plan. And I'm going to let Mr. Wendell's discuss these and any other questions the agency might have about the dredging itself, and see if we can get to a consensus on this application this evening.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
I'm Richard Wendells from Northeast Pond Restoration Services, a hydraulic dredging firm. This is a maintenance dredging of a pond that was probably created 60 years ago. It was last dredged 31 years ago, which is a very long dredging cycle. But it is at the stage which we call death's door, which means that it is just about to be overrun with invasive plants. We've already spent 2.5 days with two workers removing invasive vegetation, basically from the southern 3/4 of the pond. We pulled out 2.5 tons of invasive plants. This thing was a mess. And we're going to be working, we got permission to do some work by hand prior to the application. And we'll be there for the next 2 days, probably finishing up. There's some multiflora rows and so on. There had been some phragmites in the pond, which are very tenacious. We got rid of those already. I don't know if any of you have questions about the hydraulic dredging process. In the past, I've done 8 ponds in Greenwich, and in the past I've used my dredge, which is a 16-foot long boat, which quite frankly wouldn't fit in this pond. So what we do is we use something called a trash pump, a 6-inch trash pump, which has the same size pump on it. It's very, very powerful, 1,300 gallons per minute, and we basically use it to vacuum up the sediment, and we pump it to the dewatering basin, which you can see in the center of that area. The area that surrounds the dewatering basin up there is this is the dewatering basin. This area here is what we call the reuse area. Our first step in the setup process is to create silt fencing to enclose about a 10,000 square foot area, which is where the sediment will eventually be spread. And then as the sediment is dewatered in the dewatering basin, we'll pump at night. In the morning, they go in and they literally shovel it from the dewatering basin out. And that does two things. First of all, the sediment, when it's dewatered, is anaerobic. It's not really aerable, so you have to aerate it. But also aeration also allows the microbial activity to occur, which is necessary to convert the sediment from, its sort of very dense form into topsoil. Now, it's sort of funny relating to your earlier application. The planning plan has sort of been a negotiation because the Newmans are very athletic, and I don't know if it was still in place when you visited the site this morning, but they have a soccer field there, and they really didn't want me to encroach upon it. And something I did, which was pretty foolish, is that I didn't remember that there is a lot of plantings around the northern end of the pond. If any area of the pond were going to be impacted, it would be up here because there's a slight slope going down to here, and runoff from the road and runoff, from the lawn would typically get caught in that area. However, there's a huge willow here. It's probably got a 35-foot diameter canopy. There's a bush just above that here, and then there are two bushes over on this side. And they actually provide some buffer area, but we're willing to expand that buffer area, and we can negotiate the line. And I don't think we'll have to encroach on the recreational area, which is basically the sort of central square here. They really did want to have blue flag irises, et cetera. Now, my only other concern about the buffer plan is that in the past I have found that it's not really a good idea to put the buffer with wetland plants in it or with any form of sort of planted vegetation close to the road or driveway, because when a snowplow goes through and the snow gets piled up on it, the grass can take it, but most wetland vegetation will get killed. Basically, there's already a buffer around the pond, and it's actually worked fairly well since it's taken 31 years to get to death's door. But we plan on expanding it. And once again, the areas that I don't want to expand it too much is along the driveway here or here and here because of the snowplow effect. We have to replant the vegetation if it doesn't take, and it wouldn't survive. And obviously that will be done next season. Any questions?
Has the soil been tested in the
Yes.
pond, the dredging, so it's clear?
Yeah, we took it. It came out very clean.
Okay.
It's one of the cleanest tests I've had. It's a very small watershed. I did something at 50 Dingletown Road, and I did the Greenwich Country Club, and that's all one watershed. This is a just little sub-watershed. It's very small.
The record should reflect that members Rogers, Galvin, Curlin,
Rossi?
Rossi, yes, thank you, down there at the end, visited the site.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions on this application? Are there,
Yes, so I
do we
don't-
have an idea as to where this planting plan is currently
That's what you've
sitting?
got.
We have these two.
With regard to the planning plan, I'd refer you to the pictures, and you can see the existing willow trees and all the other bushes that are around that area. And basically what we'll do is probably expand the existing buffer a bit with the ferns and blue flag irises, but essentially that one willow tree alone, I think it's doing a lot of good right now. Willows are very good at sucking up runoff.
So I see two. All right.
Could you just define the two red lines, one's deemed ultra-conservative planting plan, and the other one doesn't have a designation? What's the approximate dimensions?
Oh, the other one was my earliest one, but both of those plans didn't incorporate the fact that there are existing shrubs and the willow tree. So I obviously have to get something to Bob tomorrow, which will incorporate both the bushes and the willow tree.
Right, there's no scale on the plan, but taking measurements that are shown on the plan between the property line and the pool and the house, it looks like the ultra-conservative planting plan up in the northeastern corner around wetland flag 10 to 12, that's like 30 feet wide. And that's the area where I think, you know, it's the least impactful to the recreational use of the property, and it is going to pick up runoff not just from this property, but from the property to the north.
Yep.
So it will have a beneficial filtering function in that location. So I think, you know, we need a final plan.
Okay, yeah.
But these are indications that there are ways to do it.
Yep.
Okay.
So I just want to be clear, Bob, you're looking at the ultra-conservative planting plan to meet the intent of the 15 feet on average for 75% of the perimeter.
I'm looking at that as, I think that is,
Pretty good.
I think it can be adjusted and cut back a little bit in the of course I picked up the wrong one. The primary, the soccer field. And, you know, it'd be wide here, maybe a little bit wider over here, and, you know, enhanced along the edges here as you're able, and, you know, it's an approximate average around the pond, right?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Additional questions? Public questions or comments? I guess I'd like to make a motion to approve a variation of the ultra-conservative planting plan as worked out with staff. That seems definite enough. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, moving along, we have application 2017-149, 65 Rockwood Lane, Joseph F. Rizzoli, P.E., for Sekou and Jennifer Kalund, for construction of a septic system 60 feet from wetlands. Bob, please.
All right, the key takeaway from this application is the existing septic system on this property is 25 feet from a watercourse. So this new system is going to be a vast improvement on that. The only wetland impact during construction will be temporary when the force main is placed under the watercourse. This will require a diversion of the stream around the work site. In the dry season, low flow periods, probably in the winter, this stream doesn't have a whole lot of flow, so it's not going to be a big deal or a long process. Mr. McTighe today sent me an email that said that the neighbor here to the south, I guess it's the driveway's to the south, but the neighbor lives to the west, to the south, has given permission to access the work site through their driveway, so there won't be any need to bring machinery across the watercourse. and coming up through the upland area to get to the leaching field site, there are no trees that need to come out in this section. And then I think there are about 3 trees up here on this, where the leaching field is going to go, that would have to come out. So, I think this is a plan that's taken the site into consideration. This site has a lot of wetlands, a lot of constraints. This is the only practical place for the septic system. And I would recommend that the agency issue a permit. My comment about needing a construction sequencing prior to approval, I think that's almost been made moot by the fact that the access is going to come through the neighbor's property. That was the main concern.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Good evening, Jim McTighe from Rizzoli Engineering.
Okay.
We're in agreement with staff's recommendations. Are there any questions?
Okay. Any questions for the applicant on this? Any public questions or comments? No? Someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? Second. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Graphically appealing plan.
Yes, actually,
Always good.
actually,
Unique in the group.
yes. Pat, we should think about sending, with your permission, one of these plans out as a kind of something that we'd like to see. I think having the photographs
No, really.
integrated with keynotes on the plans is very helpful.
They're really good.
And I think that it'd be nice if the other engineers followed suit.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you. All right. No, that we don't love you, Barry. 2017-151, 190 Sheep Hill Road, SE Minor and Company, Inc., for 190 Sheep Hill LLC for construction of a dock on the Mianus Pond. Bob, please.
All right. The Mianus Pond, this is a property that's has not had a dock before, so this is a new dock. It's sort of an unusual situation. We usually find the limit of town property at about the water line. Here there's a strip of upland adjacent to the pond that's also owned by the town. And this is pretty steeply sloping, so there's a need to build some wooden stairs to get down this slope to get to the floating dock that the applicant proposes to install in the pond. Selectman's office has issued a license for the structures on the town property. And per the the agency's inland dock guidelines, the applicant is also proposing to restore the strip of land, which is about 10 feet wide, with native shrubs and a couple of understory trees and some herbaceous plants. This currently is completely overgrown with invasive species. There may be some sort of a native shrub buried by the porcelain berry in here, but I couldn't find one. So getting this material out and getting plantings down, jute mesh, meadow mix in between the potted containerized plants is going to be a big improvement to the edge of the Mianus Pond. Let's see. I did make a note that the flowering dogwoods currently proposed at 4 to 5 feet in size should probably be bumped up one container size, since there are only 3 of those, and we want to get some shade over the pond along this strip of land. Final note, I did attach to the staff report the response from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Wildlife Division about the Natural Diversity Database. They said that there were diamondback terrapins noted in the vicinity of this property. However, further communication with DEEP, it sounds like the terrapin were found below the Mianus Pond Dam over near Route 1, near the fish ladder. But they kind of lumped everything together. So I don't believe this project is going to have any impact on a brackish water species, because this is straight fresh water up here, and they have to get up a fishway to get there. So I'd recommend the agency issue a permit for this new dock.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Katie Weatherseed. I am an environmental analyst with SE Minor. We reviewed Mr. Clause's comments, and we are in agreement with everything that he proposed. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I have one. What is the nature of the property on either side of the area that you're remediating and restoring? Is that also overrun with invasives and?
Yeah, so to the south of this property, there's there's a kind of a drop off. Yeah, in that corner. I wish I had a pointer. And that area is also, while there are more trees present in that location, it's overrun with invasives. And then the property to above this one, to the north, I believe, I'd have to check that one, but I do know that the property above that one does have a lot of invasive species as well.
Okay.
Well, my recollection is this area here on the adjoining property is lawn, and then down, right along the property line, there's some trees, and it's a little bit more wild down near the pond, but all of these properties have lawn straight back.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Any other questions for Ms. Weatherseed? No?
I had a question on the license that you get from the town.
Sure.
Does that go through the law department or?
The law department?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually not sure. Yes, it does. Apparently it does.
Is there anything in there as to who's going to be responsible for if there are any accidents? I assume that the license has to deal with the steps.
Yes. So in the dock license agreement, it's required that the owner has insurance for the dock. So I think responsibility falls on them. Yeah, there was confusion about the dock license agreement in terms of what it encompassed. Yes, so as far as I'm aware, the responsibility of the upkeep and maintenance of the dock falls entirely on the owner.
And the insurance, so I
Yes.
think I'm using my other hat as being on the claims committee of the town, so I'm concerned about those licenses and what's in them and who's responsible.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, when we get our computers back online, I could send you a copy of this agreement so you can see what's in it. It requires, as far as liability goes, a minimum base of $500,000 homeowner liability, plus an umbrella policy of $1 million minimum. And there's a term that those policies have to be maintained for, and there's a term to the license. So this is not a license in perpetuity. They'll have to come back and reassert that they're holding, the town harmless, plus have the insurance to cover any accident that might happen.
The town is not an addition, to be named as an additional insured? Well, I can look at it.
I usually look at the first page of this, not the last page where they talk about the insurance, but let me send you a copy. But this has gone through the law department.
Right.
It
Risk
is
assessment.
signed by Mr. Tessie, so hopefully it's in order.
Right. Okay. Any other questions from the agency? Public questions or comments? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second by Bill? All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next up is application 2017-152, 25 Buckfield Lane, S.E. Minor and Company, Inc., for Smoky Hill LLC for a two-lot subdivision, demolition of existing structures, and construction of two single-family residences and associated site improvements, 73 feet from wetlands. Mr. Clausy, please.
All right. Just excuse me for a second, I have to get reoriented here. Shoot. All right. 25 Buckfield Lane is an oversized lot in the R4 zone, 7.23 acres. The applicant proposes to create two building lots and set aside 15% of the property as an open space area here in the, this would be the east, the north is to the left on this plan. The wetland is in the far northeastern corner of the property. It's not very big. So the open space will encompass not only the wetland but its wooded buffer and a meadow buffer to the woods that, well, it's currently being maintained as a meadow. This property, almost all of the improvements that are proposed lie outside of the 100-foot upland review area. Just a small portion of the drainage system up here in the northeast part of the development envelope fall within 100 feet of the wetland. Let's see. None of the activities here on the front lot are within 100 feet of that wetland, and none of them are within 100 feet of an off-site watercourse that daylights just across the road on 22 Buckfield. So the recommendation here would be to issue a conceptual approval for the two-lot subdivision. That conceptual approval, the conditions that are recommended include certain recommendations related to the open space area and its how it will be maintained in the future and established. And then the other recommendation is to issue a permit for the development of this easterly lot. That has more extensive conditions of approval, which are fairly standard because this is not likely to have an impact on the wetland. There's a drainage divide that runs sort of through the house here, so a lot of this work is not even in the watershed with the on-site wetland. There are some debris piles outside the wetland, outside the open space area that would be cleaned up during development of the building lot. There's a little bit of landscaping debris, blown leaves and stuff in the wetland buffer up here near the northeast corner that should come out during the subdivision part of the project, so that that's taken care of ahead of time. But this is a very straightforward subdivision. I recommend the agency issue both a conceptual approval and a permit for the rear lot.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the agency. Larry Liebens from S.E. Minor. The cleanup of the area of the debris that's already in the buffer is already scheduled to happen between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So that's going to be underway to have that done. And we will be filing this application very shortly with the Planning and Zoning Commission. The applicant is well aware that the upper lot is going to need to be re-reviewed once it's going to be built. And the lower lot, again, has no activity, but we still have the process of going through the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm here to answer any other questions. We have no other comments as written in the staff report.
Okay. So Larry, you're looking for an approval of the subdivision and an approval of Lot 2, the Lot 2 plan.
Yes.
I guess one question I have is that if that northeast corner is being used as a debris area currently, what's to prevent it from being used as a debris area in the future?
That's the North 40, so to speak, of an existing.
Right.
There's only one family living there. Now it's going to be subdivided. The way that's not going to be. Also, it's going to be part of the subdivision process. Is once we delineate this open space, that has to be monumented, so that this way then they know where it is, and that the open space document, which gets reviewed by the town planners as well as the town attorney, says what can't, and debris, storage of debris, any tree cutting, anything like that is not included in the open space agreement that gets filed when you file a subdivision. So it'll be cleaned up, and then once it's cleaned up, it'll forever be left in its open space land, will be forever left as is.
But what's the nature of the monuments? Is it going to be a split rail fence?
No, the monuments has to be, according to the Planning and Zoning Commission, at every endpoint and at every bend, we must put, and if it's more than 150 feet, it's 150 feet. There are marble monuments that have to be up out of the ground by 2 feet.
Okay, but how is that going to stop someone from, a landscaper from going in there and dumping everything in the back corner anyway?
Well, they're going to be. You can when this lot comes back to you, you can demand something else to delineate, or you can do that now. Okay, to delineate the fact of a fence, but at this point, we don't know who's going to build it just at this particular time. So it's going to come. You're going to get another bite at the apple, and that would be the most appropriate time to do it. At this point, all we really want to do is draw a line on the map and go to planning and zoning.
All right, let me point out, special condition 4 of the conceptual approval here talks about a permanent buffer demarcation, permanent demarcation along the edge of the open space easement area. And special condition 5, how that will be the area will be maintained. And I agree with Mr. Liebman that having reviewed the, some sample open space declarations or declarations of restrictions from planning and zoning, they're very specific. I mean, they say you can't do these things. They don't say. Right. And so right, and they also give the town the authority to go in there, and if there's a problem that the easement holder, which would probably in this case be the association created by the two property owners, if they don't take care of it, the town would take care of it and then charge them. It's to their advantage to maintain it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Second thing is the holidays were long holiday weekend. People had a nice time and relaxed. I'm recommending issuing both a conceptual approval and a permit.
Right.
So you don't have to come back. We don't get a second bite of this apple.
Well, they do have to come. They do have to come back if they vary from what's on the plan that you have.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what I meant. If okay, I stand corrected. If they build exactly what we show there, and that, if you look at those houses, they're identical. They're Larry houses. Okay, they're both identical. If they would have to build very, very close, and I've done this before with staff, is okay, it's almost the same.
It needs to meet the intent.
Exactly, it will meet, so we grant the permit, and then if it comes back, then if they change their mind, they have to come back.
Okay, then I guess what I would like to see written into the conditions is that the demarcation feature is at minimum a split rail fence.
So be it.
Yep,
So be it.
Something other than monuments.
right.
Okay.
If we don't get a second bite at this apple. I'm taking my bite now.
That's right.
So be it.
Nibble.
Okay.
Your applesauce.
Motion to approve.
Well, any public questions or comments on this? No? Okay, there's a motion to approve, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? All right, okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Okay, we have applications to be received. I will make a motion to accept applications 1 through, what's that?
18.
1 through 18? Oh, there's the other page. 1 through 18 as listed on the agenda this evening.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. And finally, agent approval permits. We have 5 today. I will read them out quickly. 2017-142, 13 Webb Avenue. 2017-143, 39 John Street. 2017-144, 1 Alpha Drive. 2017-145, 16 Alpha Drive, and 2017-157, 31 Pheasant Street. Are there any questions on any of the agent approvals? No? Okay, fair enough. Moving on to violations. First is CSIC correct order 2017-18 for Angelo and Joan Kate Jenkarel, or Jenkarel. 22, The Avenue, order to submit a corrective action application. Doreen, please.
All right, so this violation was first heard by the agency at the October meeting. The members moved to uphold the requirement to submit a corrective application with a deadline of November 14th. No application has been submitted, and unfortunately, we have had no contact from the owner to staff. At this time, staff's recommending referring the matter to the law department and placing a certificate of violation on the land records.
All right, thank you. No one is here from, for this?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Quick question. The draft agenda had cease and correct 2017-16. It's not on the salmon agenda. What happened to it?
Is it the property address?
David and Janine Braun,
West Brother
Muscus, 36 West Brother.
We were waiting, they were late on submitting their application, but they submitted it in time before the agency meeting.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, next up is cease and correct 2017-19 for Eric and Barbara Rankin, 101 Bauman Drive, unauthorized clearing of trees and construction of masonry stairs and a deck adjacent to wetland and watercourse areas. Doreen, please.
Okay, the record of documents. 1, photos taken October 30th, 2017. 2, field notes taken October 30th, 2017. 3, notes from the owner. A note from the owner received October 27th, 2017. The 2013 GIS map. Stop work order issued November 1st, 2017. Violation summary issued November 15th, 2017, and cease and correct order letter issued November 20th, 2017. The property owner came in to the office to review a green sheet for the installation of a hot tub. While reviewing this, staff became aware that a deck had been previously installed for the hot tub that was not approved by the agency. A field inspection found that in addition to the deck, there was also masonry stairs that had been reconstructed and multiple trees had been removed adjacent to a watercourse. The owner has been cooperative with staff and is agreeable to submitting an application. They have an agent who's working for them and contacted staff today. A stop work order was issued on November 1st. and the cease and correct order was issued November 20th, 2017. Staff's recommending that the agency maintain the cease and correct order, require that a application be submitted no later than December 14th, 2017. If it's not received, place a certificate of violation on the land records.
Okay. Thank you. Is anyone from the applicant here? No. Okay, I'll make a motion to maintain cease and correct order 2017-19 and to have a certificate violation placed on the land record if we do not receive an application by December 14th. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, next up, cease and correct order 2017-20 for Ogden and Rainey Hammond and Hickory Homes and Properties, Inc., 11 High Cliff Road, unauthorized installation of a retaining wall and ground disturbance within a wetland buffer.
This is a project where the applicant came in for a green sheet sign-off, and all of the activities were outside of the upland review area, but right at the boundary of the upland review area. In a routine check, it was determined that the property had, the disturbance associated with the property had gone beyond that limit of disturbance as originally signed off by expanding grading in front of the house, stockpiling to the other side of the house with wetlands flanking either side, construction of a patio with retaining walls to the rear of the house, adjacent to a ditched watercourse. The property owners were on site at the time I was there, and we discussed the violations. Subsequently, a cease and correct order was issued with recommendations to file for an after-the-fact permit and restoration. I don't have the date in hand on that, so staff is recommending that the agency maintain the order for that corrective action application.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, good to see you guys again. Brian Muller, Soundview Engineers, representing the applicant, or the future applicant. We're planning on submitting a formal application by December 15th for the next hearing, or, yeah, it'll be on for the next hearing, yeah. And I'm gonna work with staff, and we're gonna figure out a way to remediate it. Our clients we're very unaware of what's going on. It's their first, jumping into remodeling and renovation of a property that they own. So I think they were a little misled by contractors that they had been using. And the disturbance was definitely outside of what we had originally proposed. So right now we're currently working on mapping the exact disturbance and the addition of this patio that wasn't on the original plan. And we're going to be revising a site development plan, erosion controls, as well as the drainage exemption to make sure we're still under that 500 square foot threshold.
Okay. Thank you. I guess question to Pat, is this an instance where a fine should be applied to the contractor?
I think a fine is warranted in as much as the agency was told this is what's going to happen, and there was a sign-off on that, and then there was a disregard for that filed map. So that's, it's well beyond what it was brought to the agency originally.
Okay.
No, at this point, who's responsible?
Well, we know who the responsible party is, I'm assuming. It was who we issued.
Yes, we have, the
permit for.
homeowners are here, and their contractor. I would suggest that the fine be issued, and the homeowner and the contractor work out how that gets paid, rather than this agency trying to arbitrate who's financially responsible.
I actually think the original contractor responsible had been fired, kind of left them in kind of a tight spot. So I would plead to be easy. I know it's usually triple the filing fee, so maybe we can work out something where the fee would be maybe just land disturbance, or I don't
Yeah,
know.
we'll have
Let's-
to look at that, because I'm
Yeah.
not sure what's going to wind up being within regulated areas to
Yeah.
the patio and the like. But so this is an addition, this is
Right.
an actual fine.
Oh, okay.
Well, we can have that conversation offline, I think, regarding the fine, because that's something you and I can work out.
Let's go after the
Okay.
right party.
Okay. So we'll be seeing an application by the 15th. Any questions on this from the agency at this point? No. Okay, I'll make a motion to maintain cease and correct order 27-20 and to place a certificate of violation of the land records if we do not receive an application by December 15th. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lastly, cease and correct order 2017-21 for Guru and Anupama Ramakrishnan. Ramakrishnan. Gesundheit. 31 High Cliff Road, unauthorized removal of vegetation within a wetland buffer. Bob, please.
I'll take this one. Quickly, the record of documents. Photos from Jim McTeague, received September 22nd, 2017. Staff photos and email chain, September 25th, 2017. Stop work order issued November 6th, 2017. 11 photos taken November 8th, 2017. Violation summary, November 16th, 2017. Cease and correct order 2017-21 issued November 20th, 2017. An email was received from the owner's agent, Jim McTeague, who was here earlier, and informed staff that there was unauthorized clearing of vegetation around the property. Tree removal had begun in an effort to clear trees that had fallen around the house and extended to removing standing trees that were dying or appeared to be hazardous. It further continued to clear the forest litter on both sides of the driveway, coming very close to within wetlands on either side of the driveway. There's photos from a May 2016 site inspection that show there were ferns, pachysandra, and a few small bushes and saplings that had been in that area. Looking at it now, there's nothing much more there than the fall leaf litter. A stop work order was issued in November 2017, and the cease and correct order was also issued in November 20th, 2017. Staff is recommending that the cease and correct remain in place and that an application be submitted by a deadline of December 15th, 2017. If that deadline is missed, a certificate violation should be placed on the land records.
Thank you. Motion to maintain cease and correct order 2017 and place a certificate violation on the land records unless an application is received by, what was the date again?
December 15th.
By December 15th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, updates.
Okay, quick updates on some violations. 21 Walker Court was referred to the Law Department for not relocating their shed off straddling a watercourse. They had 30 days from that letter to correct the issue. It has not been corrected, so the matter has been referred back to the Law Department. Similarly, 99 Sterling Road was referred to the Law Department for not submitting an application to correct a violation on the property. That 30-day window has passed. It was November 13th, so that has also been referred back to the Law Department.
And by back to the law department, they're taking court action to get compliance.
So we sent them a letter.
Yes, so these are, the letters were sent, the 30 days was not adhered to, so then the next step is to take it to court.
So what's the exact next step?
I'm sorry?
What is the exact next step in the road?
Temporary injunction,
Actual filing of procedure?
yes.
Okay, continuing, 21 Birch Lane was referred to the Law Department. Their 30-day deadline to correct the violation is today. Working with the homeowner, the plantings are expected to be fully in place by the end of the week. Also, we received a portion of the bond, and the remainder of the bond is expected to be submitted incrementally over the next several months. So that is moving in a positive direction. 471 Stanwich Road was referred to the Law Department. Their 30-day deadline is complete December 13th. They need to do restoration plantings, remove fill material, and install a demarcation feature. So we'll follow up on that and have an update for you for the December meeting.
Great, thank you so much. Anything else anyone want to bring up? Very good. We stand adjourned at 9:30 on the dot. Thank you, everyone.